Had the honor of speaking to an unusual man. We might call him in the world of business an outlier. He is the senior pastor of Dunamis Gospel Church International and overseer of many churches around the world, Dr. Paul Enenche. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Muyiwa, for...
It's a real joy to be able to sit down with you. We see you on television from afar and see the many conferences you speak at around the world. But let me come to the very beginning for you. I know that there was an interesting moment your mother had an encounter with God in the 50s. I think it was 1958 or something. Tell us a bit about that. What happened there?
Thank you, Muyiwa, for this time. My mother had come from a pagan background, especially on her mother's side. And everyone had been worshippers of the traditional worship. But something happened to her. She said it was in the year thereabout of 1958. She was exposed to the gospel. And then one night she had a vision, a revelation of Jesus Christ hanging on the cross. And then she looked up and Jesus said, "All I want from you is to just hold the helm of my garment for the rest of your life. And I'm going to sort you out. I'm going to sort your destiny, your future." She had no child at that time. I'm going to help you. And even though she wasn't literate in terms of formal education, but she held on to Jesus Christ that she encountered throughout her life. And when the children came, she began to introduce her children, including myself, to Jesus. She would wake us up every morning.
Let me ask, when you look back, when you think back to the early years, and I know your life is so full of counseling, speaking, and all these things, but if you were to stop for a moment and think back to your early years, what are the pictures that come to mind as you think about your mother showing you about Christ and talking to you about Christ? What are the pictures that flood your mind?
Exciting pictures. My mother's impact was unparalleled. She would wake us up every day, 5 a.m., and tell us about Jesus Christ. The little scriptures she knew, she would teach us about the scriptures, tell us what to avoid, tell us to avoid drink, avoid alcohol, avoid smoking, avoid women, and so forth. And she would lay hands on her children, practically lay hands on you. And we went into the world like that.
And for you, at what point did you then walk into your own faith and experience with God? Because mother's covering was great. That's right. Mother's covering propelled you to a certain point. But then Paul Enenche's experience has to start. What point did that happen for you?
That was sometime around 1979. We had great revival in the city where I was, and great men of God were coming into town. People like Pastor E. Adeboye and several of such men were coming into town and having great revivals. We had camp meetings where youth, teenagers, and young adults would be in such camps for like 3 days. I remember one we had for 3 days. It was a fasting program. I think that was the first time I encountered Jesus for real. I fasted for 3 days without food and had encounters with the Lord that changed my life.
You know, you say encounters with the Lord because many people look at you now. They would look at you speaking and the power of God being expressed and all that. I'm interested to know, in those early years, those 3 days, what was it that Jesus said to you? What are some of the things that he spoke to your heart that you're free to share now?
Within those 3 days, I can't specifically lay hold on words I heard, because there are times the things that God does in our hearts are beyond words. But one thing I knew was that there was a passion for God, a passion for the best of God, a passion for everything God has in store. That was what I would call hunger that couldn't be conquered, incurable addiction.
Let's talk about that, because I gather when because you're a qualified medical doctor.
That's right.
And so is your wife, and your wife actually comes from a long line of bigwig doctors, professors, and the likes. Yeah. But you recount that being a doctor yourself, there was something that was much deeper than curing people, that you found you couldn't detach, you found you couldn't sleep.
That's right.
What was the problem, Dr. Enenche?
I was very miserable as a medical student first and then a medical doctor. Very miserable in the sense that I had passion for the patients that was beyond what my medical practice could handle. I had passion for their souls, I had passion for their minds, and then passion for their healings. If, for example, we did ward rounds like Friday morning, and I saw a patient that was maybe terminally ill, and then Monday morning we came back for ward round, and I asked, where is this patient? And they say he's dead over the weekend. Then I'll be miserable for the whole of the week.
Wow.
Right. And then I remember that brief period, I was also ministering to their physical health. Many got healed at that time. So it was something that was like beyond what my medical training could handle, that I was experiencing.
Were there those around you back then who would look at you and say, come on, Paul, why are you being so fanatical? Calm down. Were there any who said that?
So many of them.
And have you seen any of them come back to you now and say?
Plenty of them. Wow. I've had teachers, professors who despised us then, who we felt were wasting time. What do you think? What are you feeling? And so on, who have returned back now. I remember one of my teachers brought a girl here who she said was born with sickle cell anemia, SS genotype. And she told me, Pastor, this child was born in my hands at the teaching hospital, and the mother has met me, and she's a sickler. I want you to pray for her. And that was humbling, and we prayed, and God heard us.